PSA has officially announced that they're going to start grading sports magazines and comic books, and it's a big, big announcement for the graded magazine hobby. Hey, I'm Jim. I'm with CGC Sports Illustrated. I'm going to talk about this. By the way, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information because there's a whole story that's been going on for about a year that hasn't been told about this. I'm not really going to dig into the details. My buddy Bradley, whose YouTube channel, Sports Magazines and History, he did a great video on this, digs into a lot of the details, so I'd just be repeating a lot of it. I'll kind of gloss over some of them, and then I'm going to give you my analysis and what I think this means for us in the hobby moving forward. So I did not come out with this video immediately after the announcement, and it's been, I think, 2 weeks now. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to, a week and a half, maybe. I wanted to take some time and think about it. I didn't want to give kind of a knee-jerk, off-the-cuff reaction to everything without spending some time thinking about it. And more importantly, the National was happening right after the announcement, and I wanted to talk to people at the National and get their feedback and thoughts on it, because a lot of times when I do that, they bring up things that I don't think of, and so a lot of times it can change my opinion and analysis. So I've done all that. I've been marinating over it all, and let's talk about it. So we're going to talk about this background. I will go through a few of the details real quickly, not in deep dive or heavy analysis of it. And I'll give you some conclusions about what I think this means for us in the hobby. So let's start with the background. And this, I think, is probably going to be the most interesting part to you, because I've known about this for a long time. Let's back up even further. There have been rumors and whispers for years now that PSA was going to start grading comics and magazines, and nothing really came of it. And then last year, I got an email from PSA inviting me to a meeting to discuss it. And the only hitch in this was I couldn't talk about it publicly. That was the agreement. By the way, that was really tough for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I was excited about it, wanted to share it with you. But number two, and more importantly, I have always been an open book with my content and here on this YouTube channel. I don't hide or gatekeep. I openly and freely share all of my tips and tricks and my knowledge of this hobby with everybody. I try to do it in as genuine and authentic and open way as possible. And having this information out there and not being able to talk about it certainly went against that. But here's why I agreed to do that. It's because PSA was giving us an opportunity to shape how this looked. We were being given an opportunity. I'm going to go into the details, some details of the meeting and stuff here in a minute, but I think this is important to explain. They were coming to us saying, you guys are the experts at this. Tell us how to get this right. Oh man, that was huge for me. That's all I've really wanted. I rail on CGC all the time, not because I hate CGC. I got tons of people I know and like that work for CGC. I just want it to be right. And so I had to sit here and weigh that risk-reward proposition and ultimately agreed to attend this meeting to help them get this right. But the agreement was I couldn't talk about it publicly. So that was really tough for me, and I think that's important for you to know that going into this. So there were, like I said, this meeting was last year. There were 5 of us in the hobby that were involved in this meeting. 6 were invited, 1 couldn't make it. Actually, one of the people in the meeting was at the PSA offices outside of Los Angeles when we had the meeting. The rest of us were on Zoom. So those of us, I'm not going to tell you who was there, but to give you a sense, and it's interesting. A lot of people assume that I have the best graded Sports Illustrated collection. And while I'm really proud and I've got a great collection, I nowhere near have the best Sports Illustrated collection. Not even in the top 5. I might not even be in the top 10. I'm just very public because I create a lot of content on YouTube and social media about it, so I'm kind of the face of things. But there are a lot of people in the background that have collections that just blow mine away. And that was most of who was there. So the other 4 attendees from the hobby were all people that have that are well known in the hobby, but don't really have much of a public face. Aren't doing a whole lot like I am, but they have incredible, amazing collections. So you've got these these big dogs in the hobby, and then you got me, who's kind of the public face of the hobby, or creates a lot of content around it. So there were 5 of us in this meeting. And I've had some other people say, "Oh, Jim, I really wish you would have invited me to that meeting." Wasn't my meeting. So I wasn't in a position to be inviting. I was just happy I was invited. And like I said, they had a great conversation. They said, look, this is what we plan on doing. Now, things could change, but this is what we're planning on doing. And we want your help in doing this as best we can, but we ask that you keep it quiet. So I agreed to that. Some of the things that came out of this meeting that I think are really important is all 5 of us impressed upon PSA how important the newsstand versus subscription designation is, and how important that is to have it on every single label. So now keep in mind, I'm going to talk about a lot of things that are in the plan for this. PSA is a business. They ultimately make the decisions, and they have the right to change their mind, or if they run into roadblocks on an idea that just don't work out. I don't know what this will look like when things launch, but this is kind of some of the things that have been discussed and what we think is going to happen. So we think that each slab on the slab label will either say newsstand or will say subscription. It's not the case with PSA, so that's a huge deal. PSA is going to stick with the same grading scale. Now, this is an important designation. PSA is going to have the same grading scale as CGC, so that's half-point increments all the way up to 9.0, and then 0.2 increments up to 9.8, and then 9.9 and 10. People are assuming that because PSA is using the same grading scale, that means they'll also have the same grading standards. And those are 2 completely different things. So PSA has publicly said they'll have the same grading scale. But I think the standards are going to be a little bit different, because what I've heard directly from PSA is they want collectors to have the opportunity to get an iconic PSA 10. So as you know, there's never been a 10 from CGC in any sports magazine. There are only 2 9.9s in existence, and they've only come into the scene the last couple of months. I would expect, here's how I see this. I see this like sports cards with BGS and PSA. A BGS 9.5 is generally thought of in the marketplace as equal to a PSA 10. I think you're going to see something similar. That's my prediction on this, is that you'll see a CGC 9.8 will be the same as a PSA 10. So I think that's a very important thing that's coming into this, and something to keep in mind and be aware of. The difference between grading scale and grading standards. Those are different things. A big muckety-muck VP from PSA was on a podcast recently and talked about how talked a little bit, some interesting things he had to say about the slabs specifically. And I think they're really harping on the fact that CGC has had a number of scandals recently regarding people cracking slabs and it getting past PSA, and all sorts of problems with security issues with the slabs. So I think PSA is really focusing on that, and what they're saying, I'm paraphrasing here, is basically you'll know when somebody cracks open the slab. Now, I don't know if that's going to mean they're going to have some sort of like hologram that changes color, or the plastic will change color once it's broken, but they're going to be doing something to kind of enhance the security of slabs, which is a great plus. Another thing he mentioned is that these slabs will have UV protection. How huge is that? That's a big, big deal. Now, again, all of these things can change because PSA is not launching this service for another 6 months. It's supposed to be first quarter of 2025. Again, we hope they hit that deadline, but don't be surprised if it ends up taking longer than that. So again, everything I'm talking about here is definitely subject to change. They will not include oversized mags. So if you've got Vintage Rolling Stone, Life Magazine, a bunch of other oversized magazines, there's no plans to do oversized magazines right now. The graders are different. They're not using sports card graders for comics and magazines. There was a lot of discussion about that, and people just assumed they would just use the same graders. No, they're not using the same graders. They went out and hired professional, experienced comic and magazine graders to run this division, so they'll have completely separate graders. And part of this is the way they're structuring it within CGC or within PSA. This is being run under the pop culture division of PSA. So different from the sports card division and different from the, autograph authentication division and all the other things that they've got going on over there. Elizabeth is the woman who's in charge of the pop culture division. She was mentioned in the press release. She's been amazing to work with in this whole process, and she and I have talked on a regular basis, and she's been great about this. We impressed upon them at this meeting how important label notes are, first covers. That's what really made graded game tickets so interesting, is because the slab tells the story. It says on the slab, this is the ticket from Mickey Mantle's 500th home run game. This is the first major ticket from, Jackie Robinson's major league debut. That information was on the slab. And we talked to PSA about how we think that was a huge reason why graded game tickets are so successful today, because the story is on the slab. And we said that they've got to do that with magazines, not only first covers, but first pro covers or other things that are interesting and noteworthy about this specific issue. And so I would expect that as well. Obviously, we also impressed upon them that variants are hugely important, and to do that properly and to get those variants set up in there and to have them broken out in their pop reports. So label notes were a big thing that we impressed upon them. When it comes to pop reports, PSA came out and said, yes, they will have a pop report, but it will not be launched when magazine grading is launched. It will come later. A couple other things. PSA is going to authenticate autographs for their magazines. No surprise there. They've been doing it for all sorts of collectibles forever. Originally, I was told that they were only going to grade Sports Illustrated and Time, but then there's been some other information in the in the press release and other follow-up information that's come out from PSA that leads me to believe that they might actually grade pretty much anything as long as it fits in their slab. That'd be great. That's the way CGC operates. As long as it fits in the slab, they'll pretty much grade it. So not quite sure exactly if they're going to have a restriction on which publications they're going to grade or everything, so that's kind of up in the air right now. Look, there's been a lot of complaints about the look of the PSA comic and magazine slab label. I haven't been one that has complained. If you're that worried about the way the slab label looks, to me, that is one of the least significant things about a graded magazine collectible, is the way the label looks. I want the label to be accurate. I want the label to relay as much information to me as possible. But the way it looks, I don't get the outrage that's out there, and mostly it's coming from the comic side. I don't understand the outrage out there on that. It looks fine, and I actually kind of like it because it looks exactly like a PSA sports card label. So that's kind of the background and the highlights and what's been going on for about the last year as it relates to this. Now, here's what I think, my conclusions in all of this. Look, this is nothing but great news for the hobby. Number one, it brings a lot of attention to the graded magazine hobby. The vast majority of sports collectors still don't know that Sports Illustrateds are able to be graded today. So this is going to bring a lot of eyeballs to the hobby. It also brings a lot of legitimacy to the hobby as well. Game tickets weren't collectible really until PSA started grading them. Funko Pops took off in popularity when PSA decided to start grading them. PSA grades VHS and they grade video games. They are the clearinghouse for all collectibles, especially sports collectibles. So when they say, hey, we're going to grade this piece of memorabilia, it legitimizes that hobby. And so I think that PSA doing this just absolutely legitimizes the hobby. It's a huge, huge deal. And it'll bring, just like I said, tons of eyeballs and new people coming into the hobby, which is always a lot of fun. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, are you going to use PSA or are you going to use CGC? And I've said, my response has been, why wouldn't you try out PSA? I'm going to be sending submissions into PSA the first day that grading is available. Why wouldn't you try them out and see how they go? What I love about this is now we've got competition. We were always pigeonholed into CGC. We didn't use CGC to grade our magazines because we loved CGC. They were the only game in town, and we were stuck with them for all of the good things and the flaws with CGC. But now that we've got competition, everybody's going to have to earn our business. And that's always a fantastic spot to be from a customer standpoint. When businesses are competing for our business, we win. And so that'll be a great thing. Absolutely, I'm going to get stuff graded day one from PSA. Beyond that, I hate to come up with a whole lot of conclusions. Although I will say this, PSA is such a behemoth in the sports world that it's going to have a significant impact on our hobby. Talk to comic book guys. Comic book guys, they get all their comic books graded by CGC. Great, wonderful. But the comic book guys that also get sports cards graded, the vast majority of them don't send their sports cards to CGC. They send their sports cards to PSA. That's how big and how powerful that PSA brand is. And I'm not a sports card expert, but I mean, the data is clear and the analysis is clear, and that is the fact that PSA graded sports cards sell for a premium over pretty much any other grading company. The only argument could be made with Vintage and SGC. Is that going to happen in this hobby? I don't know. It's just way too early to tell. So, that's kind of the background on PSA and grading magazines, my thoughts on it, some details, my conclusions. If I didn't answer, if you got a question that I didn't address, definitely drop a comment and I'll do my best to get that answered for you, or at least give you my opinion. It's a great time to be in the graded magazine hobby, especially for Sports Illustrated. As soon as I hear new information coming from PSA, I will be sure to let you know, either here on YouTube or on my social media channels. And by the way, if you're not following me on social media, what's wrong with you? I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, eBay, pretty much every platform. Same username is here, CGC Sports Illustrated. Oh, by the way, that's the other big question I've heard. People have asked me if I'm going to change the name of my moniker name for all my content channels, CGC Sports Illustrated. Here's the answer to that. Yes, I am going to change it. But I was due for changing it a long time ago. But the fact that now CGC isn't the only game in town, this has kind of forced my hand. Not quite sure if what I'm gonna call these channels anymore. If it's gonna be my my real name or my business name, which is Pressing Content, or something else. But yes, there will be a name change coming for all my channels. Shouldn't affect you in any way other than it'll just have a different name up there. So if you got questions, comments, your thoughts, you drop them in the comments, and we'll be talking about this for the next 6 months because this is a big deal. Appreciate you watching. Thanks.